This is Graphite Radio.
What's going on, peeps? This is Graphite. Graphite is a creative platform designed for creators and troublemakers who want to improve who they are as creators. We're a community of forward-thinking rebels that can help the next generation of thought leaders, problem solvers, inventors, and builders create a better tomorrow. Knowledge transfer is crucial in any industry, especially in the various creative fields. Through coaching, career journey mapping, portfolio optimization, and design thinking, we unlock the full potential of the creative pro in you. Let's get started. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Adrian A.D. Franks. A lot of my peers do call me A.D. Long story, that name comes from college. A good friend of mine named Craig and Quentin gave me that name. So it's just, and Vic, God bless, R.I.P. Yeah, gave me that name a while ago, and it's just been kind of fun using it for these last, couple of decades or so. But yeah, I'm your host, Adrian Franks, here to talk about, cool stuff, design, and welcome you guys to Graphite Pro. So recently, I had a couple of friends of mine on a group chat, some former colleagues. I used to work at an agency a while ago. Asked a simple question about giving advice to young people who want to actually do some type of career changing and potentially get into the business of advertising. They're two women. They're more likely trying to get just good advice, especially on the lay of the land of advertising, how to really get started. And I mentioned to the group that if you're going to be doing advertising, you got to look at it in its current state. Right now, advertising is really going the way of magazines and the music industry. And by that, I mean is more or less consolidating. It's kind of becoming the dinosaur of, yesteryears. Its heyday is kind of not where it used to be, obviously. So if you take advertising as an overall field, just like most fields, it's going through its own consolidation and overall optimization. Now, with that said, you got to take this idea of what technology has done to advertising, what social media has more or less done to in terms of taking a lot of the power from the actual four holding companies, Omnicom, Publicis, IPG, as well as WPP. These guys have more or less have owned the whole spectrum of advertising now for the betterment of 30 years in terms of a consolidated field at the time that it really brought a lot of these independent shops up under the holding companies. But if you look at now what's going on, more and more people are not really paying attention to the old advertising channels, which is magazines, which is radio, which is actual TV, obviously. More and more people are streaming. They're consuming the information online. They're actually getting information from their peers via text, or they're checking on things on social media, or they're more or less listening to a lot of podcasts, hence what you listen to now. So that said, that mindset of that, more or less that format, or that formula has more or less interrupted what we have known as traditional advertising. If you're now trying to buy ads that's going to capture a lot of attention at any given time, that's very hard to do, especially since more and more people are streaming and time shifting how they consume media. Now, if you're looking to get into advertising as a profession, well, here's a couple of things you need to consider, being that this industry now is more or less is kind of going through its own seismic change and shifting because of everything is going through that, right? A couple of, positions or even full-time employee employment opportunities need to be considered. So I'm going to run down a list, and maybe we can talk about these things individually. But ultimately, here's the things to kind of consider. Media buying, right? So if you think about media buying, that's one profession. Well, the reality of it is they control the money, right? They're spending money on behalf of brands for big media companies, where you're now talking about an OMD or what used to be Universal McCann or any of these other media arms of the big holding companies or the big advertising holding companies. people who buy media based on campaigns, based on reach, based on certain initiatives that a brand wants to actually engage in, well, they buy media in different places now. They used to be buying media in the traditional spots. They bought media in, TV, print, radio, but now they're buying media literally all over the place. What are you now saying? Mostly on Facebook, buying things that's going to be on certain sites. They're buying search. They're obviously placing things in audio, some things on radio, not a whole lot there. They're definitely not buying magazine ads, so that's one thing they're not buying is that. And buying TV ads, well, forget about that as well. They may be buying pre-roll on YouTube, but in terms of, being a media buyer, that is one profession that seems to be going to be around for the long haul because at the end of the day, clients do have money that they need to spend to reach and engage our audience. So media buying is one. Number 2, social media manager. So, most people are now in this social sphere where it's going to be Facebook, Instagram, what used to be known as X. Well, I guess Instagram and Facebook are technically the same company, Meta, right? Or even, this idea of engaging people in other social platforms, whether it's going to be like a Twitch or it's going to be, YouTube or anywhere that people can, actually do comments. But ultimately, social media manager would be a person who knows how to engage your audience using different methods, whether it's going to be content or, just actually doing comments back and forth with a particular, person who may be commenting on a post posted by a brand or, a person who understands like KPIs and metrics of what's working on social and what's not working. But being a social media manager or a professional, I think it's going to be a pretty good one to consider as well because, well, social media is not going anywhere. It's the new TV, right? So, social media manager. Number 3, strategists. In the past, we used to use strategists to more or less inform our briefs and definitely give us like a North Star of where we need to go in terms of like a campaign. I think strategy now has more or less have to shift to think about more about the consumer experience or the consumer journey, like giving you more like the North Star of what the experience should be. So whether you're going to be activating in like social media or you're going to be activating and pushing people towards a brand's website or some of their digital properties, or you're more or less going to activate a consumer experience in an app, right? So I do think a strategy in this point is more or less about like where the consumer is going, more so than what the brand wants to do. I think it's symbiotic, but strategists in today's terms, they're going to be looking at all the insights. They're going to be collecting data. They're going to be looking at, certain things like e-commerce data, probably like social media data, looking at what campaigns are working and informing a brief or more or less a go-to-market strategy or some type of consumer engagement strategy to more or less engage your audience around an initiative. So strategists, totally works. Definitely having that as a profession would be great. I would say the next one, like a solid 4 is to learn every aspect of AI. I know we're like in this thing that we're saying AI is a bubble, but AI is here to stay, and AI is nothing new, right? If you're now saying machine learning or people using AI to more or less tag videos for like some kind of streaming service or AI in your phone, right? So, Google uses AI to make sure that it gets you to the right destination. And it's, Google Maps been around like forever. So, AI is nothing new, but like this idea of generative AI or AI that's going to more or less help generate new ideas, whether it's going to be, speech or text or imagery or strategy. AI, as a professional, can be used in multiple ways from a generative perspective, right? It can look at a brief and give you a better brief. It can look at an Excel or a PowerPoint or a Word doc and more or less take like some, interviews and give you a readout or like the top line of what to expect from this playback, right? So it can really do a lot of things in terms of automating tasks while you concentrate on doing bigger and broader things in your profession, whether you're a strategist or creative or a producer. But if you think about whatever AI, because there's no one AI, that you can use to get your job done quicker, well, the better, right? Quicker you get things done, the more a client can save on hours and the more that they can save in the long run. But if you're using AI to help optimize your workload, like that can be a great thing to consider as well. One other thing to consider too is to be client facing as much as possible. I know a lot of young people come in and they want to kind of be quiet or be in the background or learn. But what I'm noticing from all the different places I've worked, whether it's the consultancies or the agencies or the tech firms that I've worked for in the past, that more and more you could be client facing, the better, right? Because you're adding value to whatever firm you work for. You're actually talking to clients, you're giving them suggestions, you're consulting them, right? And you're more or less not just being a fancy note taker or just a quiet voice in the room, but the more and more you're client facing and actually giving client recommendations, strategy work, ideas, like that's what clients come to you for. They want ideas to solve business problems. So, being client facing, you're going to get a lot of practice doing that, especially looking at other people who are a little bit more, older and been doing this a little bit more longer than you. Being client facing and seeing how they're doing it is just a great thing to do, right? So yeah, be client facing and get in front of clients as much as possible. Consider working for a tech company that runs their consumer engagement through their own channels, right? So I would say this is like a good solid number 6. So what I mean by working for a tech company, yeah, sure, you can go work at Google, you can go work at Apple. I guess you can go work at Spotify. I guess Nike is kind of considering themselves quasi-tech, right? But they're more brand. But anyway, I think, this idea of working for a tech firm or a company that have like tech capabilities, especially if they're running their own apps or like running things on their website, or maybe they're managing like the kiosks at their banks, like being understanding how they're using tech for those sector or their business is key, right? Because ultimately they have customers. They either got B2B customers, B2C, or B2B2C, or enterprise customers. The goal here is to, at the end of the day, figure out how they engage essentially a client, right, or a customer. So, being able to understand how these guys maybe optimize their apps or the kiosks if you're like JetBlue, or if you're like optimizing like a website that help people increase retirement funds or whatever. Running these different channels are different ways to engage the customer to do specific things, right? And if you're thinking about those different channels, it usually involves tech people, it involves product owners, it involves designers, it involves strategists, it involves the customer. So having those experiences with these companies that have direct connections with the customers, I think is key, is the best thing to have, right? So yeah, go work for a tech company or a place that actually is running their own tech. Yeah, I think the next point, number 7 would be learn CX, learn UX. They're kind of the same, they're kind of different depending on how you're using it. CX, aka consumer experience, it really puts you in the mindset of understanding a consumer journey, right? So you want to know, like, okay, how do you bring a consumer into a purchasing funnel or a brand experience? Where's the first touch point? Where's the second? Where's the third? Where's, where you kind of leave them off at, right? Or do you create like this never-ending cycle of always engaging that consumer, right? So you want to ask yourself, looking at a consumer experience, it makes you have to look at the consumer journey and get empathy of the user, right? Understand like the pain points, understanding passion points, understanding the friction for a consumer when they engage in a brand or product or service, and looking at that and saying, well, what ideas can solve some of these problems, or how do we optimize this just to be a better consumer experience? Now, UX takes all of that strategy thinking around the consumer experience and it makes it tangible, right? It usually maps out how you're going to do that, and you're going to map that out through some method of like taking a person and completing tasks through screens, or if in the case of setting up a new device such as your earbuds for your phone, right? Like, how do you teach somebody to use a product, or how do you teach somebody to complete a task in terms of like retirement, or it could be around adding an account to your bill account, or could it be something that's specific in putting your weight for like some kind of weight loss app. But ultimately UX delivers the CX in a tangible way that a user can understand. So I think those two things are kind of interchangeable. They have their unique points in terms of one versus the other, but I kind of see them really as both. So learn CX, learn UX. Point number 8, maybe consider working at a consultancy that has lots of clients. You take the Deloittes, the McKinseys, the Ernst & Youngs, the Accentures of the world, the IBM Consulting, like these big worldwide global consulting firms, they have clients literally all over the planet. And here's the cool thing about, these consultancies. Sometimes they have a client, such as a banking firm, to be as an example, they have multiple projects going on simultaneously. So you may be working on something about accumulating a user who's new to using their services, to helping somebody more or less manage their retirement fund, or helping somebody manage their wealth portfolio in terms of a bank. Maybe it's an entertainment company like a Live Nation, who more or less help sell tickets, but they also manage venues, and they have the Ticketmaster app, but they also have their venue apps as well, where you can more or less order your drinks as well as order your tickets or even order your concessions all from the same app, right? Now, if you're saying somebody kind of like, maybe it's like a credit card company, sometimes these guys have multiple divisions within the company where it's going to be around the cards, the different types of cards. Maybe they have a payment system they got to consider. Maybe they have buyers and sellers, but ultimately, all these different companies that are global, they more or less have different divisions that need different needs. And consultancies kind of come in and help these guys assess risk. They give them recommendations as well as ideas to either optimize the business or even consider selling it off, or more or less try to figure out how to make it run better, right? So consultancies may not be a bad idea. Some consultancies are actually operating like agencies. They even bought agencies, these last, 10 years or so. So, yeah, consider working at a consultancy. You can more or less get a chance to see the business from every angle, whether you're creative, your strategy, maybe you're like a BA, or maybe you're like even overall tech. But working at a consultancy, you can see how every part of the business is ran, and you get the whole holistic. Well, another thing to consider, I guess this would be point number 9, is maybe work on the brand side. Here's the funny thing. It used to be this taboo thing that working on the brand side of things was not the best thing to do. It was oh, that's not cool. You should work at a agency, working on the brand. You just kind of like a hand, you're a tool. You're not really doing anything. Well, that's kind of flipped. So working for an agency, or working for the brand, actually, it's kind of the cool place to be. They have all the budgets. They have a lot of the data, which they didn't have at first. They definitely know their clients very well. Brands know one thing, but a client, or the brand side of things, they know their clients very well. So, yeah, consider working on the brand side. They're going to have a lot of departments that more or less do certain things, whether it's the marketing or managing a product, or handling some of the tech, or even doing things around social media and consumer engagement, even running the innovation lab. So I do think consider working on the brand side of things versus just working purely just for consultancies and agencies. I think my last point would be possibly, if all possible, I guess, maybe avoid working for an agency. They're slowly walking to the graveyard. And it's not to say that agencies won't be around. They're, of course, going to be around. You're going to have a need to have ad agencies, right? They're going to have to develop some kind of campaign every so often. They just won't be developing campaigns as much as they used to. So develop, as opposed to developing, 10 campaigns for a brand, any given brand, any given year. Maybe they're doing one and iterating that campaign, right? You're going to need agencies to place media. You're going to need agencies to hire talent every so often. But ultimately, I think the agency world as we knew it is kind of slow walking to the graveyard. So I would say maybe for now, avoid working at the agency until the smoke kind of clear and the dust settle from the big consolidation that's going on now. So yeah, maybe avoid that, and maybe do some of the other points I just mentioned. Now, I just gave you 10, things to consider. Here's some other provisional things too. Now, me personally, I've been a creative in the design and advertising and tech field now for the better than 30 years. And I know that world is definitely changing. If you're now talking about like the invention of these new AI tools, as I mentioned earlier, AI is nothing new, but some of these newer tools are pretty cool, right? So I would tell you that if you want to be a creative in the creative field, the design field, or the advertising field, I think having hard skills still helps, right? Being able to learn how to use Figma, Photoshop, or Illustrator, or any design program is ideal, right? But I think the bigger thing is learning how to collaborate with teams, especially using tools like Figma, which allows you to collaborate in real time with teams all over the place in one file. That's one thing to consider. Learning AI, like listen, AI is here to stay. I mean, you can like it or love it, it's here, right? So learning the different AI tools within the current tools that you're using is going to be important, right? Like Photoshop has been around since the early 90s, maybe the late 80s. But now Photoshop has AI capabilities, which allows you to retouch things pretty quickly. So if you're an art director at an agency, you don't necessarily need to hire a retoucher to, complete an imagery that you need to present to a client, right? Maybe you can just use the generative AI tool that Photoshop uses, currently have in their tool, to kind of do a quick touch up or add a graphic or change a visual that maybe you shot on your phone. So using, some type of AI tool as a creative, it's going to make sense. Or using Sora, which allows you to generate a quick video, which is, obviously created, developed by OpenAI, same people who make ChatGPT. But yeah, having these different tools is only going to make your life a lot more easier. Also, as a creative, nothing beats being able to tell a story. So having great presentation skills, being a critical thinker. It's one thing to learn about the craft of art direction and copywriting, but definitely being able to tell a story and walk people through a consumer journey. I think those are the new skills that most creators need to really dive into. I know a lot of creators who have great ideas can't sell their work, can't present their work. So being able to present your work in front of a client to sell it, that's still needed. And AI can't replace that. Like a human has to go and literally sell the work, right? Get people to believe in something. Leading teams as a creative, that's a new world that we now have to be ultra collaborative. So being able to lead a team or lead somebody on a Zoom call is going to require you to be able to communicate in a more masterful way than what it used to be in the past. So again, great presentation skills, critical thinking skills, communication skills are a great key to being a great creative, right? And of course, you still need to have some of those other hard skills that I mentioned earlier. One last point overall, whether you're creative or you a producer or you maybe in strategy, I do think regardless of your role in this particular industry, being able to understand how content works and being able to create it for the different channels is key too. That's taking on a strategist's mind. So when you create content, it no longer is going to be, a 30-second spot or a 15-second spot or, you're doing some type of small film. Like you can do a small film, right? But really, what kind of content are you creating to engage your audience? Is it a meme? Is it a still? Is it really more likely a quick 30-second or maybe like a 3-second video? Is it a 15-second audio snippet? Is it a podcast, right? Like the podcast you're listening here. But the goal is to think about content, the audience, what type of content that audience is going to consume, and how do you chop it up and seed it in throughout the different social platforms to kind of drive people back towards somebody to engage a brand or a service or take an action or some type of CTA. So yeah, learning how content work on IG, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, a website, a podcast, it's important, right? Because now it's no longer it's not just about making a 30-second spot anymore. And also, listen to a lot of podcasts. Podcasts is the wave, right? It's that very cool, passive way to consume information and be able to just kind of listen while you're actually doing all the work. I love podcasts. This is probably my maybe third or fourth podcast show I've not necessarily produced, but, in terms of a different format. I've done different podcasts with other people. I've actually co-produced different podcast shows in the past with different creators. But I think this current one I'm doing now with the GRAPHITE Pro it's fun, right? It's like a new way to take my learnings and my knowledge and transfer it to you guys, right? So I hope you guys take this information, and I hope it works well for you. Just be on the lookout for more programming and more like interviews. I kind of like to just talk though, right? So I'm not going to be so dependent on, having to talk to people. But I want Graphite to be like a great, just, media experience, that it can be me talking to you about different things to consider. It could be me interviewing somebody who I think is like phenomenally dope. Maybe it can be, some short documentary work, right? Because I do want to actually tell the broader story of like different people who bring impact to this industry and just the creative design community overall, not just advertising. But I do think this is a great, kickoff, almost like a teaser podcast. And hope you guys come along for the journey. It's going to be a fun 2025 and beyond. And it's going to be a great time on this whole Graphite Pro journey. Definitely tune in. I'll give you some of these social links at some point. But right now, I'm going to have this just more or less live on, Spotify, Apple, definitely from my website, and figure out, the strategy of like taking this to a broader audience. But it's going to be fun. Thank you guys. Stay tuned. Stay creative. Stay cool. Be human. Peace.
You've been tuned into Graphite Radio, where creativity meets culture. Part of the Caffeine Audio Network and proudly distributed by Pepper Labs. Thanks for joining us on this journey of ideas, art, and innovation. Be sure to subscribe and stay connected for more stories that shape the world we create. Until next time, keep sketching your vision into reality.